Madison. Whoa. Hello, folks. Great to be with you. Great to be with you. Well, let me tell you something. Russ is only wrong about one thing. I will not be offended if you leave and go vote right now. But you got to vote. Congressman O'Can, Senator Tammy Baldwin, my good buddy, Russ Feingold, and Christine, the next pair to occupy that seat, God willing, and the creek not rising, as my grandpa would say. 4 days left. 4 days left. And the stakes, this is not hyperbole, the stakes could not be higher. And the contrast, the choices you have, could not be more stark. I should probably just say, ditto to everything Russ said and leave and go over and watch you vote. But I'm just going to say a few things. Number one, Donald Trump and Ron Johnson, they are cut from the same political, ideological cloth. No, think about this. This is real. I'm not looking for you to applaud. I'm looking for you to really focus so you can talk to the friends of yours that may be on the fence or haven't voted yet. Ladies and gentlemen, they're both climate deniers. Johnson says the jury is still out on climate change. Talk about being out. Whoa. Talk about being out of it. He went on to say that the last 2 summers haven't really gotten warmer. Where in the heck has he been? Up in Alaska in the Arctic Circle, it's even gotten warmer up there. And Donald Trump said, and I quote, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive." It'd be funny if he wasn't serious. I wonder if these guys are going to acknowledge there's such a thing as gravity before this is over. Ron Johnson voted, and I'm not talking about his character, I'm just talking about his politics. They never go after another man or woman's character. No, I'm serious. He's a decent guy. But here's the deal. I just look at his judgment and what he voted for. Ron Johnson has voted for a budget already in the Senate that cuts taxes for millionaires and raises taxes on middle-class folks in the United States. This is not Joe Biden's judgment. These are independent tax analysis. Donald Trump says, with regard to taxes, "I didn't pay any taxes. That makes me smart." No, but think about what it says for a president to say that. Donald Trump says he rooted for the housing crisis because, quote, "that is good business." Ron Johnson ran against the Recovery Act that helped folks buy homes for the first time, helped folks stay in their home, reduced energy costs, and helped wounded warriors refinance their homes. Donald Trump says Mexicans are murderers and rapists. I don't want to take out of context, but Ron Johnson talking about charter schools referred to inner city kids as idiot inner city kids. No, please, I'm really not looking for you to boo or cheer. I just want you to focus, man. No. I really want you to focus more than you even have. Donald Trump laid out a $9.5 trillion tax cut, greatly benefiting the top 1%, which is either going to do one of two things by every outside group looking at it. It's going to either raise the deficit by $9 trillion over 10 years, or require a cut of 40% across the board in every government program, including Social Security and Medicare. That's a fact. Ron Johnson has already voted, though, for a budget in the Republican minority in the Senate. Thank God it was a minority because it passed the House, which voucherizes Medicare, means you get less, which privatizes Social Security, cuts tuition tax credits, guts Pell Grants for 8 million students in working class families, cuts elementary and high school education by $2.7 billion a year, kicks 157,000 kids out of early education through Head Start. As a matter of fact, neither one of them think early education matters, giving people an opportunity. You realize that a kid coming out of a middle or upper middle income household or wealthy household will go to school having heard 1 million more words than a child coming out of a home below $50,000 in income? Talk about a fair shake. These guys don't get it. Donald Trump says, this is what he said now, and he's repeated it. Wages for American workers are too high. That's a quote. Ron Johnson seems to agree. This guy not only doesn't want to raise the minimum wage, he doesn't think there should be a federal minimum wage. Look, this really is. I understand that Senator Johnson introduced Mr. Trump at an event they jointly did, and he referred to it as the Ronald and Donald show. Well, folks, given a choice, I'll take Ronald McDonald. Look, where I come from, if you keep an audience standing more than 15 minutes in a hard service, you lose all their votes. You've already been standing that long. I can go on. I haven't even gotten into foreign policy. Trump actually said, imagine what all kidding aside now, think of what this does to embolden Putin with the lies he's telling people in his home of Russia and around the world about the United States. Think of what confidence and help it gives to ISIS and others when he says in a debate with the United States military moving on Mosul, the center of the caliphate set up by ISIS, he says that the reason the coalition is moving after all this planning is to make Hillary Clinton look strong. Now, I'm supposedly an expert on foreign policy and national intelligence matters. I promise you, that's the propaganda that is being sold in Syria and in Iraq right now. That this is really about the United States really only going after ISIS because we want to make it politically more palatable. Ladies and gentlemen, when he was asked whether or not he agreed that the Russians and Putin were hacking the United States through cyber espionage, he said that the 17 United States intelligence agencies that have come out and said on the record that they know it was Putin and the Russians, he says that he wants to be commander-in-chief. He says to the world that our national intelligence agencies don't know what they're talking about. All kidding aside, think of the damage that does to us internationally. Think how that plays into the hands of radicals around the world. Putin is a strong leader who didn't invade Ukraine, in case you haven't noticed. That's what he says. A nuclear Japan and Saudi Arabia would be just fine. I was down I've traveled over 1,150,000 miles for the president because when I speak, every world leader knows I speak for the president because of the relationship. Not because it's all reflective power. It's the president. And I have there's not a major world leader I haven't known in the last 35 years just because of my job as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. I was down in Melbourne, obviously in Australia, meeting with the prime minister who stood for re-election again and ended up with a smaller majority and was worried about what we were going to be doing relative to China in the region. While I was there, I got a phone call from an old friend, an old acquaintance, the former defense minister of Latvia in the Baltic states. I had to come to the Baltic states right away. I had to meet with the leaders of Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania and then make an address, nationwide address to all three of their constituents. Why? Because Donald Trump said he wasn't sure he would support them in NATO against a Russian invasion if they hadn't paid their debt, paid their dues. Ladies and gentlemen, the damage being done is already manifest. This man is totally, thoroughly, as a consequence of what he doesn't know, what he thinks he knows, and the way he's demonstrating his character. He is thoroughly unprepared and unqualified to be the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America. It's not even close. And folks, on a deadly serious note, can you imagine any president in American history, assuming that technology existed, doing what Donald Trump did, getting up at 3:30 in the morning and tweeting vitriol about a woman's body, her body shape, and her weight? What does that say about the character of this man who wants to, I mean, all kidding aside, pick the worst president in American history? Can you fathom any president of the United States doing something like that? Ladies and gentlemen, these guys are from the same policy perspective. They seem to be carbon copies of each other, not in character, in terms of their positions. I guess they're expecting this nation to be besieged by collective amnesia. These are the same trickle-down policies that generated the most severe recession in American history, short of a recession. Everything that's happened has eviscerated the middle class, those struggling, the working poor. Folks, they call me back in Washington, as Russ will tell you, middle-class Joe. That's not meant as a compliment. That means I'm not sophisticated. But let me tell you what I'm sophisticated about. I know who built America. I know why we're the nation we are. And it's because of the middle class that has not only generated economic growth for the wealthy and given the poor a way up, but it has been the social fabric that's held this nation together in times of crisis, unlike any other democracy in the world. You know, there used to be a bargain. There used to be a basic bargain in America. And the basic bargain was, if you contributed to the success of the enterprise you belonged to, you got to share in the profit. You got to share in the benefits. That bargain doesn't exist anymore. Study done by a professor and published in the Harvard Business Journal points out that 444 companies who've been in the Fortune 500 for the last 10 years, from 2003 to be precise to 2013, they made $2.7 trillion. That's a good thing. They spent 54% of it buying back their own stock because that's how they get paid. They spent 37% of it for their investors, that is their stockholders, and dividends, leaving 9% for everything from expansion, research, development, salaries. Ladies and gentlemen, that's not happened before since the 20s in the United States of America. It's generated such concern that 5 of the country's top 20 CEOs asked to see me in my home, the Vice President's home, including a guy named Richard Branson who flew from England to be at the meeting. Now, and here's the deal. You know what they want me to do? I'm going to do it. Lead an effort to change the corporate culture in America. They understand. They understand. They understand that this concentration of wealth, corporate or individual, is the greatest threat to economic growth in the world. This is not Joe Biden or progressive Joe Biden or Russ Feingold. This is the IMF, the International Monetary Fund report. This is the fund report, the report coming out of Standard & Poor's. The more concentration of wealth, the less likely for the economy to grow overall. These guys don't get it. They don't get it at all. And the bargain has been broken. Folks, over the last 8 years, and by the way, before I lowered my hand on that freezing cold day, that magnificent mall with over 1 million people watching when I was sworn in, we had already lost that month in 2009 680,000 jobs. We lost a total of 800,000 that month. Ladies and gentlemen, we were at over 10% unemployment. But we've gone from crisis to recovery, and we're now on the verge of genuine resurgence. We have a possibility. We have the opportunity to grow this country in every way, unlike any time since the end of World War II. We've created over 15 million jobs, more than all the advanced economies in the world combined. Wages are finally beginning to rise. The last quarter growth was 2.8%. When we took office, the unemployment rate was above 10. It's now below 5%. So folks, but there's still a lot of people that got left behind. Maybe some of your parents. An awful lot of people, while Trump was rooting for a housing crisis, they never missed a mortgage payment. They never did a single thing wrong. They got a great review of the last year at their corporation. And one day they wake up and find out, because 2 cockamamie loans were taken out in that same street they live on, and the lawns are turning brown, they lost all the equity in their homes. Never having missed a mortgage payment. They walked into work and said, "Give me your computer key before you go up." They did nothing wrong. We lost $17 trillion of wealth, household wealth. We've gained back over $26 trillion. But guess what? It's gone to the top. Not because they're bad guys, but it's because you're not still in the market, a lot of your parents. So as the housing prices went back up, you never recovered your equity. An awful lot of 401ks, retirement programs were wiped out. The stock market was heading below 6,000. It's now above 18,000. But they weren't able to get back into the market. So a lot of people are hurt. But because there's more to be done. But Hillary and Russ know there's an absolute need to deal with corporate irresponsibility. A tax structure where everyone pays their fair share. Guys, when Ronald Reagan was president, there were just under $800 billion in what they call tax expenditures, loopholes. Okay? You know how many there are today? $1.3 trillion a year in tax loopholes. There's a rationale for tax expenditure. It either promotes a social good, or it generates people being willing to take a risk for the benefit of everyone, and they're justified. You can't possibly justify more than $600 billion of these loopholes today. They know, Russ and Hillary, know we have a sacred obligation to preserve Social Security, which you and your parents paid for. You paid for it. And Medicare, not to either privatize it or voucherize it. Hillary and Russ know that climate change is actually real. It's actually real. Over the last 8 years, we've increased our solar power 30-fold. We've tripled energy from wind, powering 16 million homes today. We brought down the price of renewables so they're now competitive with coal. And folks, I'm announcing today that we're putting charging stations for electronic vehicles on 25,000 miles of highway across 35 states, which will make electric vehicles of the future powerful. And Hillary pledges by the end of her first term, we'll install 500 million solar panels on home, and within 10 years, every American home will be able to be generated by solar power. That's progress. And by the way, all of that is not just good policy. It creates tens of thousands, millions of good-paying middle-class jobs. Ladies and gentlemen, let me define what I mean by middle class. I have a lot of really bright economists work for me. And when I first raised it in the second year of our administration, I was making the case we should focus more in the middle class, and one of the economists said, well, that's $51,200. And then his argument was, it's $51,200 or $52,300. It's not a number. It's a value set. Middle class means being able to send your kid to a park and know they're going to come home safely. It means being able to own your home and not just rent it if you choose to. It means being able to send your kid to a local high school that if they do well, they can get to college. And if they get to college, you'll figure out how to get them there. And it means when one of your elderly parents passes, you can take care of the other, and you hope and pray your children will never have to take care of you. That's middle class. That's middle class. That's what we're about. That's what the president and I have been focused on. And Hillary and Russ will too. And they know how to grow the economy and increase access to work. You know, just by increasing the child care tax credit instead of a continued tax credit for racehorses. You think I'm joking? I'm not joking. By capping child care costs at 10% of your disposable income. And by the way, you know what an awful lot of young people here fortunately don't know, but I'm glad you're here. You know what the cost of child care for 2 people is in Madison for 2 children? $18,000 a year. I know you know. You know as you hold that beautiful child. But I want to make sure everybody else knows this, okay? By making 12 weeks of medical leave paid instead of unpaid, do you know anybody, are any of your families able to go 3 months without a paycheck? Raise your hand. No, I'm not joking. These guys just don't understand what ordinary people, good, hard-working American people do. I don't know anybody in the neighborhoods I grew up in could go 3 months without a paycheck. So you get 12 months of unpaid medical leave. How does that help you? So Hillary says it should be paid medical leave. You have millions of people in America, notwithstanding what Ron Johnson thinks, working 40 hours a week and living in poverty. How can that be justified? They're working, and they're living in poverty. Not a joke. Literally, poverty. Below the poverty level. If we just did those 3 things, you know what would happen? We'd be able to put back 500,000 qualified women who want to work that are unable to work. 500,000. If you did that, that by itself, you know, Republicans always talking about they're the party of productivity and growth. They haven't come up with a pro-growth idea in a millennia. Guys, and I really mean this. We are about pro-growth. If we did what I just said, 500,000 women back in the workforce, that would increase by econometric models that are done by independent agencies, that would increase the GDP, the gross domestic product, by 9%. You hear me? By 9%. Generating a virtuous cycle of creating more jobs and more into the economy. But in order for us to continue to take advantage of this resurgence that is on the way, we need what Hillary knows and Russ knows. We need the best educated public in the world. My wife, who's a college professor, my wife, and I might add, teaches full-time, 15 credits, English, no TA. Okay? I'm known in Washington as Jill Biden's husband, and I'm proud of it. But here we go, folks. Does anybody who is responsible, Democrat or Republican, do you think they think that 12 years of free education is enough in the 21st century for us to have the most educated workforce? No, I'm not joking. What was it made us so powerful beginning in the late 1800s through to the 1960s? We were the only country in the world for the better part of the first half of that century that had totally free education for everyone grades 1 through 12. Now, ladies and gentlemen, that's why Hillary and Russ, Barack and Joe, that's why we have been supporting the plan for debt-free college education. Now, let's just take one example, because I know, I hope there's some Republicans in the audience. I know the Republicans are having a pang going, oh, there they go again, the big spending Democrats. It costs a lot of money. If you just took community college, right now there's 6 million people in community college throughout the country. If it were free for 2 years and it only would go to people who had a B average and went to community college where all their credits were transferable to a 4-year state school, okay? If you did that, you'd increase the number of enrollment to 9 million overnight. If you had 9 million in community college per year, that would increase the GDP on a yearly basis by 0.2%, again growing the economy. But guess what? It costs a lot of money. It costs $6 billion a year to make that free. There go those Democrats again. Well, here's how we pay for it. Everything Hillary proposes, we propose, we pay for it. I am listed, I'm not bragging about it, it's not a good thing, but if you Google Joe Biden's financial disclosure, in 2009, my first disclosure as vice president, I did it for 36 years as a senator. In the Senate, I was listed as the poorest man in the United States Congress. Well, I made a pledge. I got elected to the Senate when I was 29 years old. I come from my parents weren't college educated. We were middle class. We thought we were doing fine. We lived in a 2,300 square foot split level home with 4 kids and a grandpop and my mom and dad. And it was fine, by the way. It was fine. And, but when I got elected, I wasn't old enough to be sworn in. I had to wait 13 days to be eligible to be sworn in. No, for real. And I made a commitment when I got elected that I would, number one, never own a stock or a bond because I didn't want any appearance of conflict of interest. Number two, number two, I would never be engaged in any business enterprise, even though I was allowed to keep my law firm back then, and I gave it up immediately. And number three, I said I'd never accept an honorarium or payment from anybody at an interest before the United States Congress. So that's why I support Russ so much. I'm the first guy to introduce the constitutional amendment for public financing of elections. That's why I love this guy, Russ. But, so when I filed my financial disclosure form in 2009, you can Google it, as I said, Washington Post, lead story, top of the fold, first paragraph, quote, "It's probable no man has ever assumed the office of vice president with fewer assets than Joe Biden." I assume they didn't mean intellectual assets. So I didn't know, and I should have as a grown, educated man, I didn't know what the tax loophole of stepped-up basis was. Now, stepped-up basis says that if you're fortunate enough, and by the way, wealthy people are as patriotic as poor people, and I'm not one of these guys as everybody, I don't buy, wealthy people are decent, good people. But here's the deal. If you go out, if you're wealthy enough, and you buy $1 million worth of stock, and it accrues in value over 3 years or 4 to $2 million, and you decide to sell it, the way it works is you got to pay a capital gain on that $1 million you earned, which is less than what you pay in your regular taxes. But if on the way to sell it, God forbid you get hit by a truck, and it gets left to your son or daughter, and they sell it the next day, they pay no tax at all. Now, they make up 0.4% of the population. They're good folks. They're already very wealthy. And the last thing they need is another tax break on top of the tax break their mom and dad had. You know how much that costs the government every year? $17 billion a year is not collected. If you eliminated that one tax cut, I can pay for every single solitary person in community college for free, cutting in half the cost of their education, and I can reduce the deficit by an additional $11 billion. I can do all Russ and Hillary in terms of paid leave and all the things I mentioned. All you got to do is change one part of the tax code, punishing nobody. Right now, if you're in the top 1%, you can deduct a charitable contribution or any other deduction in the code at around 38%. If you just limited the deduction to 28% for everybody, that's the max you could do. You know how much that raises? That raises $660 billion per year. That means we can pay for every single thing that we need to grow the economy: education, infrastructure, child care, the things that grow the economy, the things that generate strength and power. So folks, look, it's almost, it's redundant to talk about how unqualified these guys are for the future. This is really a choice, not a joke. This is really a choice between the future and the past. And by the way, I love these guys. They should have been with me in the civil rights movement. They should have been here in 1966, 67, 68, 69, 70 when I was at Madison at the University of Wisconsin. They should have seen what the fights were about. They were about ending the war. They were about making sure my generation got engaged in civil rights and civil liberties. Ladies and gentlemen, I love it when they talk about the good old days. Try being a woman in the good old days when. Try being an African American in the good old days. Ladies and gentlemen, we are the most powerful. We are the most progressive. We are the most, put another way. I love these guys dumbing down America all the time. Find me a single respected poll, nationally, internationally, since we became president and vice president, that doesn't say the most respected nation in the world is the United States of America. Find me one. And it's not just the example of our power. Granted, we have the most powerful military in the world. But why do people repair to the United States? It's the power of our example is why they want to come to the United States, why we are so respected. It's the power of our example, ending torture that these guys want to renew, making sure that under no circumstances can that be done, shutting down Guantanamo, doing what we say is what we say in our Constitution. We hold, it sounds corny, but we hold these truths self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their, and women, but the men, I'm not going to amend the Constitution for you in the verbiage. But all men or women are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. I mean, we believe it. We've mostly honored it. The history of the journey of this country has been a constant move. To paraphrase Dr. King, the arc of history, it's always been forward. And what these guys want to do is literally move it backward. Look, I know I got in trouble when I'm the first guy to come out because I couldn't remain silent anymore and said, I believe in marriage equality. I know I got in trouble for that. But I told the president when I took the job, 2 things I wouldn't do: wear any funny hats and change my brand. Here's the point. I was not only brought up by a father. I remember him dropping me off to get an application to be a lifeguard in the city swimming pools at the courthouse. And two guys in business suits, where that's the main area where all the major corporations in Delaware are. Two guys in business suits back in 1967 leaned over and kissed one another and moved in different directions to the different buildings. I looked back at my dad, I hadn't seen it before. And he looked at me and said, Joey, it's simple. They love each other. It's simple. But here's the deal. The point that I want to make about that's not about me. I made a bet after I got beat up from doing that Meet the Press interview. I made a bet that the vast majority of the American people already agreed with me. Well, guess what, folks? 57%, and within 4 days they did a poll, agree with Joe Biden. Which leads me to my concluding point. Those of you in here are college students just going in, just getting out. Those so-called of you who are the millennials, you are the most incredible generation in American history. Not a joke. No. You are. I'm not trying to be nice to you. This election is totally within your control. You now have a higher percentage of eligible voters to vote in this election than we baby boomers have had for so long. So here's the point, guys. You have no excuse. None. There's